Welcome to Blockchain All-Stars. I'm your host, Layla Gulen. Blockchain and distributed ledger technology are at the forefront of the Internet 3.0 era, where the technology can enable trusted and transparent sharing of data and digital assets. Although the technology is still in its early stage, who makes up the constellation of innovators guiding us through the digital revolution powered by blockchain? Well, as the famous quote goes, when bankers get together, they talk about art. When artists get together, they talk about money. Well, Oscar Wilde was certainly wise, and so is our guest. Amrita Sethi is an award-winning Golden Visa holder and the first NFT artist in the Middle East. After a successful career spanning 15 plus years in some of the world's largest multinational financial companies, Amrita left the corporate world for a deeper calling, which led to the creation of a new multimedia art form called SoundBYTE. And SoundBYTE merges sound, technology, and storytelling with NFTs, giving Amrita a perfect platform to showcase her dynamic art form. And with so much more to learn, Amrita, I want to thank you so much to join us on Blockchain All-Stars.
Wow, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. And thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Well, first, what does being a Golden Visa holder mean?
So I've actually lived in the UAE for the last 14 years. And Dubai is a beautiful place to live and a very all-inclusive place where they want to welcome people from all around the world. And they also want to welcome people from top talents in their industries. So what the UAE has issued is golden visas to people who are experts in their fields that allows them to stay for 10 years within the UAE without having to renew their visa. And so I was very honored and lucky to receive this, very prestigious honor from the UAE Dubai Art and Culture for my contribution to the digital art market in the UAE. So it's something of definitely an honor, and allows me to call the UAE my home and allows me to continue to express myself as an artist here.
Goodness, that's a members only club of maybe a 0.00001% of the world's population. That's quite the honor.
Absolutely. And for me, it's also just really being one of the first NFT artists in the UAE is also something that I wear proudly as well.
Yes, absolutely. Well, SoundBYTE is a unique idea that garnered a lot of attention from Forbes, CNN, BBC World News, to winning awards and being selected for Expo 2020. So I'm just curious if you can tell us a little bit more about SoundBYTE, what it does, how you came up with this idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, as you rightly said, I used to be, sort of a banker turned artist. And while I was in my, in that transition phase, I actually was working for a lot of the world's largest corporates. And I originally wanted to go and do my own thing from, just from an entrepreneurial, but it's still in the financial world. And in that time, I don't know, but I had this obviously passion for art when I was younger. And I think sometimes that as we get older, we kind of sometimes lose our passions behind, or we feel, life takes over, or we feel that was just a dream, that, it was nice while we had it. But I just connected to myself in that, that time between taking some time off. And that's where I always say I discovered my voice, right? So what I do with SoundBYTEs is I say a word or a phrase or a person's name, and like I can say your name. So we can say Layla, and then capture the shape and structure of the sound wave. And then each of the lines of the sound wave, I draw to match the meaning of the word. Yes. So there's been things like sound wave art, where you literally see just the lines of the sound wave. But this kind of combination of imagery with also the sound waves, with also storytelling, is, I think, where then when I created it, I was like, I don't think anybody has done this before. So I went to go copyright it just to make sure I wasn't copying anybody, to be honest. Because I thought on one hand, it was a pretty obvious idea, but then nobody had done it. And so that's how I discovered my own art genre. So you kind of just see behind me, if you look there, there's this one actually says the phrase, "What the NFT?" which I actually created around this time last year, when NFTs really kind of took a massive that's when it kind of exploded into the market, when Beeple's work sold for 69 million. Then everybody was like, all of a sudden, like, what is an NFT? And like, so it's like capturing, I think, the incredibility of like what the NFT, because there was so many, and I still think there are still so many questions around how can just a JPEG be something of so much value? How can it be art if I can't touch it, if I can't feel it? And so what I do in this piece, especially, for example, behind me, is that, it tells the story of where NFTs have come from. So looking at things like CryptoPunks and, things like, the Beeple sale and, aspects of the history of it, but also trying to kind of tell a new story and tell a new narrative. Because I think, what NFTs are providing is a real shift in our mindset. And it's a paradigm shift, not just for the art industry. Art is the first thing that was able to capture people's attention. But NFTs are really here to stay and change the way we work fundamentally across all assets, across all digital information, from everything from art, even to media.
Mm-hmm. And the subject matter of your art. So when you take a word or someone's name and you turn it into an image, is there a certain subject matter that's associated usually that you tend to lean towards, or is it just whatever that word or name speaks to you?
Well, I mean, it's a very good question. I think for example, if I said your name, right? And in fact, this is something that I've already done quite a bit of, but now I'm going to be going into the realm of with celebrities, where you say your name and you tell me your story, you tell me your narrative. And so it all comes down to, like, where were you born? What where did you come from? What do you do? What defines you? So it's like a modern day portrait telling, but also in a really dynamic way. So like if we think about the Mona Lisa, what they would have to do is take a portrait of the Mona Lisa and try to capture the essence and vibrancy of that subject. But I've used now technology, art, sound, and storytelling to tell a very dynamic story. And even, for example, if I did one for you, you could even tell a story a year later. So you could even have every year. And you could have a different story. But even if I asked your friends and family about you, maybe they might write another story. So the whole premise of my artwork, or what SoundBYTEs are kind of based on, is, you've heard of the phrase, a picture's worth 1,000 words, right?
Right, yes.
But what I do is I flip it on its head and I say a word is worth 1,000 pictures. So whether it's your name, whether it's the city of Dubai, whether it's what the NFT, it's a lot of different images will come up. And so that's what I try to capture. But I also, when I do my art, I kind of now start to use it as a way to write new narratives and new stories, right? So, for example, I've done a piece as well called Africa Blockchain. And with that, obviously, I captured the word Africa and used the Africa blockchain. But I wanted to, instead of creating these kind of black and white and dreary images of starvation and whatever, like a country in need or continent in need of always help, I've created a colorful one where, the future of blockchain is actually leapfrogging it into, really what you could even overcome certain other developed markets now. So it's about what are the stories we tell ourselves? What are the narratives we see? And how can I also change that imagery to create, new ways for people to see things, if that makes sense?
Oh, it absolutely does. It's like a collision of a portrait and a biography all in one piece. I just love that. It is such a profound thought. You have set live activations and installations across the Middle East, Asia, Europe. So this must be something so new for people to see, to experience. So what has been the reception, not just from astute art collectors and people who are in that world, but just people walking down the street who may not collect art, but are just spellbound by what you do.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, because I come from, I call it from the, the traditional world or the normal world, and I've transitioned to the digital, people who are in the digital world are firmly there, that, that they've understood, they've accessed that different dimension. But what I believe is that we have to take everybody on that journey, right? But you can't overwhelm people, you can't overload people. And what I want to show people is that NFTs are not just, there's so many big headlines that NFT is just about making money. It's just about doing these big collections. It's just about, I don't know, there's also negative things around it. But what I'm trying to show is that, NFTs is really for the creator and the creative economy. It's really a game changer of how it can unlock so much more creativity, and that how art will now move from just a 2D flat kind of visual experience to a kind of a multi-sensory, multi-dimensional experience. Mm-hmm. And what does that mean? So, for example, like I now use a lot of, before I would use just like a simple QR code that goes with the artwork that actually plays back the sound. So that's accessing one dimension. But what I do is I use things like augmented reality and AI, and now going into virtual reality to kind of make that a bit more of a different experience. And I'll give you an example. So in Dubai, I've painted one of the world's largest augmented reality NFT mural. And so the mural, if you go into it, I mean, it's literally 20 meters long by 15 meters high. Like, I don't know what that means in American feet, but that's
big.
It's really, really large, right? And so if I'm like 1.65 meters, that kind of gives you an idea if it's 15 meters, right? So it's really very, very large. And so you go to it, and then now you scan the QR code, and instead of just the voice coming, the whole wall pops out at you, literally, like. And because it's through augmented reality, you are actually interacting with it live. And so you have the wall that is static, and then it's now fully immersive experience. And so what I wanted to do with that is I want to show people and take people on the journey to be able to say, like, this is really the new way to experience art. Like, even the piece behind me, you'll be surprised if I just hold up my camera. If I activate it, you'll actually be able to see a whole 3D animation coming out at you just from the piece behind me. Oh, wow. Which I don't know. I mean, I don't know. We can maybe even try and see it a little bit.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Let's try if it works. Wait, oops. So like in here, you can see that, right? Yes. It's now going to the artwork. And it's like, it's telling the story, but through a different thing.
So neat. That is so neat.
Because I use a lot of augmented reality in my art, is you can experience it right now from where you're sitting, from any screen. So if, for example, you go to my latest project, it's called the SoundBYTEs. And it's spelled like and then alpha BYTES. And there's on the main page, you'll see a QR code. Scan that QR code with your phone. So do it onto your laptop on your screen at home. And then it'll pop out into Instagram. Then what you can do is the filter will come up and you point it then at the artwork, which you'll see there, which says Meta Reversed. And the entire screen is going to pop out at you. So first the sound wave of the word Meta Reversed is going to come out, then my language, and then it decodes it into English saying Meta Reversed. So it decodes it from my language into English, and you can experience it. And in fact, what would be really cool is you press the middle button, like you're taking a story, and you can film it, and you can move around the screen, and that becomes a story. So I would love for yourself or the people watching this to go and try it. and then tag me at Art by Amrita on Twitter, or even art.by.amrita on Instagram. And then you'll be able to experience. And if you go to my website, there's quite a few of AR enabled artworks, which will then literally just pop out of your screen. And you can do this even on the go, on your mobile or on your computer, because this for me is really the way we are going to be interacting with everything in the future. Everything's going to look static, but with a flick of a phone or with a Google Glass or with an Apple Glass, you'll be able to then see the whole world in a different way.
It's incredible. I can't wait to try this. Now, these are the public displays. How does one contain that in their home if they want to collect those? I know that you have the picture on your wall, but then for people walking by, is it just, now everybody has a smartphone, so just scan that QR code and be brought into that experience?
So that's the experience side. And again, that's a very good question. So it's now then, creating the experience, but then how do you do it so that people then can own a piece of it, right? So obviously you can do through, NFT. So there's I'd say there's three type of assets now in art, right? There's the physical art, which is behind me, for example. You have the NFT, which is the digital format. So you could buy the NFT to it, or you can buy the physical to it. But there's a third one that's coming up, and it's a new word, which, it's kind of becoming well known in the digital world, called a phygital. So it's digital.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I know you're like, what? It's a phygital. So it's digital plus physical makes a phygital.
Oh,
right? So it's like, for example, and all that means is that when you buy the NFT, you also get a physical artwork with it.
I see.
So it's a combination, because you don't always, when you buy an NFT, it doesn't necessarily mean that it comes with a physical item, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. So it's this kind of third one of being able to get both. And
is that a way for people to just, because we're all so very kind of tangible people? I mean, now with the metaverse, there's a lot of people living in these artificial realities, but still many of us do like the tangible. We like to feel tactile, and to actually see something hanging on the wall. So is this to appease those who have maybe not yet reached that level of metaverse, I guess,
mindset? So 100%. And I think my latest collection, that's exactly what I try to do. So I've actually just dropped a smaller but very significant collection for me. One of the advantages of the metaverse or NFTs, I feel, is that anything is possible, literally anything. I always say the only thing that stops you is your imagination. And so I thought, well, if anything is possible because of how much it unlocks through technology and creativity, I thought, why don't I just create my own language? So I did. So I took the alphabet, which is really, if you think about what the alphabet is just a series of sets of symbols that we as human beings have just learned to just decode ourselves. Like, we've understood the code and we know that A is a shape and that means something to us. But if you have things like Arabic or like Chinese or whatever, you have different shapes, right? And so what I did is I took the alphabet and I took my SoundBYTEs and then I combined them to make the alphabytes, which is also a play on a byte of the alpha, BYTE, which is a byte in terms of, the sort of techie term. And so it all kind of falls together to complete what I'm trying to what I'm kind of entering, right? So a new language. So I then created the word, the first word that I chose from my alphabet is the word meta reversed. Okay. And the reason why I chose that word is because what is the metaverse? The metaverse is us going from a physical format into a digital format. So like, for example, even now, if we were having, so we're both here, we're both physical, but we're in the digital. The only difference is if we were in the metaverse right now, is that our avatars would literally be sitting right next to each other, and we would be able to be interacting with each other, right? Mm-hmm. And that's really the future of how we will be being interviewed and how we will interact in the future in the metaverse. So, but what I was doing, sorry, my Siri is listening to me. So what I did is very
still
techy.
working.
Oh, still working. Still working. I'm just going to put it on. Okay, so what I did is I said to myself, okay, there was a recent big art fair in Dubai, which is called Art Dubai, and they have an NFT section. So what I wanted to show there was, if you go to the NFT section, you're going to expect to see screens and NFTs. But what I wanted to do was create a physical artwork so that people could make that connection stronger. So I took a digital form that I'd created and brought it into the physical format, hence why the word was meta reversed. And I created a sculpture in this word, in my new language.
Oh, wow.
So,
that is so interesting.
It's exactly, so it's this kind of, when you see it, you understand, because actually what had happened is I created this sculpture and it says meta reversed in my own alphabet. But one of the other, I'm sure you've heard of this, one of the other great advantages of NFTs is that it allows you to physically to fractionalize something like an asset. So I'm sure you've heard how NFTs are fractionalizing homes or artwork. So you have like an artwork by Salvador Dali or Picasso, and people can't afford to buy the whole thing. So what they do is they fractionalize it into small pieces that everybody can buy, and then the whole community owns the piece of artwork, right?
Oh, interesting. Yes.
Yes, so I think that's a kind of common use of it. But
and speaking of ownership, though, if I can ask you this, artwork, it ranges in many different price points. Your work has sold for $500,000. When you look at fine art, not everybody can own something such as that, or a Picasso. How attainable are these NFTs for the average person to own?
Exactly that. So, exactly. So this is where it's been such a game changer, because it allows people to have access to something they wouldn't be able to do. So, for example, just to continue this, is that what I did is I had a sculpture, and instead of selling that for $500,000, what I did is it was made out of 145 slices of aluminium dipped in gold or silver or copper. And so I created 145 NFTs. And when you buy an NFT, you get a physical slice of the sculpture. So I physically fractionalized the artwork so everybody actually got a piece of the sculpture as well as the NFT.
Oh, interesting. Why 145?
Because, to be fair, that's how many pieces there were when we designed it.
I didn't know if there was a special story behind that number.
Yeah, no, it kind of did. There was the story because of how many, because I did it, the sculpture is made from like a sound wave concept. So some are higher, some stacks were higher, some stacks were lower. And so just overall, so it's the kind of thing where it's actually, I think it's one of the world's first physically fractionalized NFT sculpture, because so this is what I like to do, is just say, okay, what is it? How can that be more relatable? Like, instead of you buying one NFT and just getting a concept of that you own a bit of a artwork, but you can't physically touch it, I've said, okay, here's your NFT, but now you actually own a part of the actual artwork.
It's like taking the Mona Lisa and slicing it. And giving a piece of canvas to somebody.
But then it kind of still holds its own identity.
That's right.
So yeah.
Exactly. That is so interesting. Your artwork has been showcased in the public in the UAE. How about here in the United States? Have you picked a city? Have people here been able to see your work up close and personal in that same fashion?
It's definitely, I mean, it was definitely something that I'm aiming towards. It's because obviously with COVID and all of the kind of restrictions that have happened, you know, getting my pieces physically there is definitely some of my priority. I mean, you know, there's been so many amazing like events with blockchain weeks in Miami and New York. I mean, I was meant to speak at NFC and NYT, and then also in Miami, and then there was something recently in LA, but it's just been difficult. But that's one of the advantages of hopefully of, you know, of this kind of wider net, I would say, through the digital format, is that a lot of people are getting to know about me in the US. In fact, there's a very large, in fact, one of the world's largest NFT collectors who lives in Miami. His name is Pablo Fraley, and he owns a lot of some of the biggest art collection from people, you know, Blau, from Pac, from Rafiq Anadol, some of the world's largest NFT. And I'm on the same kind of, we're in the same community. And Pablo just bought 12 of my latest SoundBYTEs collection. And to quote him, he says it's the most comprehensive collection to date, because what I do with the SoundBYTEs is I showcase all the aspects of NFTs, you know, through also augmented reality, and the SoundBYTEs is in the metaverse, and I've created digital wearables of that word. So I mean, it's just really very extensive, and I'm just trying to show people the power of what you can create if you do it well.
Yes, and I've heard that NFTs and collecting NFTs amongst the Miami set has been very popular. Are NFTs being sold in New York galleries and Los Angeles and Chicago and places like that? Are we seeing more and more of these popping up, or is it still a very new technology, a very new art?
I think the States is definitely the leader, I would say, in all of this. And I think, you know, I mean, in terms of really, if you really, you know, you always say as an NFT artist, you really want to catch the market, is catching the market in the US. And so, yes, absolutely. You know, people are really into it. They're really understanding it. But NFTs have also now, I would say, and naturally so, are now taking a slightly more move away from it just being about art, but now moving the concept of community and utility. So you hear a lot about these two words. And so, you know, community, if I break it down, is around, you know, you've heard of the board, you know, Ape Yacht Club, right?
Yes, of course, yes.
So it's one of the largest NFT collections out there. And where they've been super successful is having a community of where you want to be a part of that community. So the NFTs stop becoming just about the art, but it also becomes a kind of proof of a visual proof that you are in the club. You know, like you're in part of the club. You are, you know, and that's why these kind of profile pictures, PFPs, then you can put that, instead of putting it on your wall at home, who only people who come home see it. Now your wall, because our new walls of our homes are the walls on our social media, right? So your Twitter, your LinkedIn, those are your real walls, right? Yes. But because we haven't made that mental shift, actually, why show it just at home when you can show it to everybody? And so if you also think about the history of art was always to have beautiful, like some, you know, that's where the wealthy and the rich, they show off their prowess, that we are part of that club that can afford to own a Picasso. And those people who come to my home are able to understand that I'm part of that community. Right. And so to its core, that's what it is. And this is also where, you know, this is where it's also an important shift in terms of the paradigm.
Yes, indeed. Let's talk a little bit about your upbringing, if we can, Amrita. You have lived in so many places. You were born and raised in Kenya. You're of a British citizen, Indian origin. So tell us a little bit more about your childhood and how it's brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if you've ever met an Indian, Kenyan, British person before.
No, I have not.
But it's definitely a thing. And I'll give you a little bit of a 2-second history lesson. The Brits obviously went and colonized India first. And India being the large continent is, they built the railways there. Then they went to East Africa. And again, Kenya specifically, a lot of Eastern Africa is a very important port to the rest of Africa because it's mainly a landlocked continent, right? And so Kenya was always very important from a trade perspective. So a lot of the Indians who had built the railway in India were taken to Kenya to build the railways that then would service the trade that would then come from the Silk Route into the West, into the rest of Africa. And so that was my kind of, I'm 3rd generation Indian, but of of Indian origin. So my bloodline is Indian, but for me, I can consider myself very Kenyan in that sense because our family had been there for years. Yes. And so a lot of the Indians stayed on and they became either business owners, but my family came and stayed as the lawyers. So we were some of the first lawyers of Kenya. But my father, so that's on my mother's side, but my father was an architect who worked for the UN. He actually studied in the US and MIT, that's it.
Oh, so MIT, of course.
So he studied at MIT. And, he could have, at the time, he could have stayed. And that was the time when, that was when they were building all the big high rises in the US. But to his core, he wanted to go back and take his skills back to Africa, which at the time was very unusual. It's not so unusual now, but he wanted to go back and build. So he did a lot of things from an architectural perspective. So I always thought I was going to become an architect because I was very artistic when I was younger. I was also weirdly good at maths. And so this is also the weird thing about me. It's just like that, having that left brain and right brain activated, which sometimes is always the case. But then I kind of weirdly fell in love with economics at like 18. So weird.
And so which companies did you work for when you were in that financial world?
So some of the world's largest, like I started my career off in Barclays in London. And then I moved to Dubai, worked with HSBC. I worked in Switzerland with HSBC Private Bank, and then with Zurich Insurance. So always like, blue chip, top tier, I was corporate through and through. And so the change, I think, was something which a lot of people, even to this day, they can't believe, and it's only happened in the last 3 to 4 years, right? And so what I would say is, I'd say the difference between, I would say, the centralized world and the decentralized world is, in the centralized world, when I made the move from being a banker to an artist, the kind of very old school art world was like, that's, you know what I mean? That you're not, that you're not a thoroughbred. You didn't go to university and studied art, how can you come into this like later on? And, it was, it's quite centralized. The artistic can be quite, centralized, right? And so, but it was only, and so I was always a little bit, I would say, shy to even call myself an artist at first. But then the minute I found NFTs, the NFT community and the decentralized world and the blockchain world and the crypto world just celebrated actually that. And they understood that having that background plus NFTs, and then I've now taught myself a lot in terms of technology. Like I'm always I've always been very interested in the future, and I love like different and new techs. And they were really like it's a whole different vibe in terms of how welcoming you are. You're welcomed into the community, and this is what I love, is that anything is possible. Whereas sometimes in this I'd say the more traditional world, there's still a lot of boundaries that you had to break through to get recognized.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So your travels have taken you from Kenya to Switzerland, Zimbabwe, Uganda, the UAE. How much of those cultural experiences would you say have impacted you and have impacted Art by Amrita?
Yeah, I mean, to my core is who it really fundamentally shapes who I am, right? And so I'm really, really lucky and blessed to have, so many different I would say just different experiences. And I think what it has taught me is just about different perspectives and different dimensions, right? And that you can always see things in a different way. And it's interesting to see, again, I've become, I believe very, very strongly in the power of words, right? The power of words that we tell ourselves, the power of words that our parents told us, and the power of words that our parents told us, and then you can just literally go through generations. Yeah. And I've like, I would say about 5-6 years ago, I got very much into things like, I'd say I became quite spiritual, say whatever you take from that, but maybe to its core is talking a lot about sort of neuro-linguistic programming. So I discussed a lot around how the neuro, which is the brain, the language, how we have programmed our brain and our minds to think in a certain way. And that is those things are very hardwired because of exactly like, what is the narrative that you tell yourself today? And just try it for the next 24 hours or for the next week and say, what do you say about yourself to other people? Mm-hmm. Because, what do you say to yourself? Because all of that has an impact on our personal reality, which then affects our personality. And we become so hardwired into a certain story about ourselves, yes, or story about the way we live, or story about the politics, or story, whatever the case is. And what I try to show is that we really are the artists or the authors of our own life. And in this moment, in this moment, should you wish to do so, you can change your whole life, because you are the one who is the painter. You are the one who tells the story, not just to yourself, but to everybody else. Like, I went from the story of me being a banker, now I'm an artist, and that's my story. And I created that. I consciously went out of my way to say, where my focus has gone, my energy is, where your focus goes, your energy flows, right? So the more and more you tell that narrative, the more and more you create new neuro-linguistic pathways, not just in your own mind, but how people see you as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know that we talked about just how you saw something that was so unique, innovative, that you trademarked it. But where exactly did the inspiration come from for SoundBYTE? What was that moment, that spark where you said, wait a second, I want to take this and create it and make this?
I think it's actually, I've never thought about the answer this way, but it actually answers your other question in terms of like my background. So actually what had happened is, my husband is Swiss, and so we were actually weirdly in India, and I was just taking some time off to just, to connect to who I was. And I wanted to make something sweet for him. I think it was his birthday, or I don't know, something. And I said his name. So I wrote out his name in the sound wave. So I captured it. And then when I did it, I pressed kind of hard at the top. And then, you're just drawing the lines like this, right? And so when I pressed hard at the top and I went down there, it started to look like a little head and a body. And obviously growing up in Kenya, you always have the Maasai men. And this is a lot how they're abstractly portrayed as a bit of a big head and a thin body. And then you kind of just like, so then I started doing that. And I was like, actually, but Maasai men have got nothing to do with the Maasai have got really nothing to do with my husband, who's from Switzerland.
Right.
And then that's when I thought, okay, actually, let me start to then combine the story with the person, what I'm trying to do. And then I was like, oh, wow, okay, that makes so much sense. Like, why don't I just do that? And then so I started my first collection actually with cities. So you can see I've got like Delhi or Dubai there. Yeah. And the reason why I started it with something so recognizable is because, you know, I wanted people, because obviously this was again before NFTs, I wanted people to just visually kind of see that it was a sound wave, and then, you know, was the story. I mean, everybody can know the story of a city. So I think I just wanted to make it more recognizable.
That is so fascinating. So obviously you saw the beauty of the sound wave itself, that there was something unique and beautiful about that.
And it's about adjusting your perspective, right? So like when people see things, like you see this, now you just see images, right? But now you understood that it's a sound wave. And so like I take a lot of inspiration from artists like Salvador Dali, who also did the same thing. It's just how you adjust your mind frame is how you then start to see different things, which just goes back to my point of being able to create new neuro-linguistic pathways to see a different reality, right? Because we get so stuck in the way. I mean, I'll give you a really classic example that happened to me. My name is Amrita. You spell it out Amrita. I won't tell you how old I am, but I've been staring at my name for a very long time in my life. And it was only after I became an artist that if you take the letters of my name and you redesign it, it spells out I am art. How crazy!
Oh my goodness.
Crazy.
You are correct.
Yeah. Yeah, I am art. So now you're going to think about your name, what it spells into.
But like we used to play games, actually. We used to play games in school. If we broke down our names, what we could create with our names. And some of us, we just couldn't get too creative. Yours, however, I think was written in the stars.
There you go. And I think this is it, is this that sometimes you've got to get out of your own way to understand what your calling really is. And I think we sometimes spend so much time chasing things that are not right for us because we may have been conditioned or coded in a way that we maybe is not right for us. And it's learning to recode yourself.
Yes. Yes. Do you have a favorite piece that you've done thus far?
Oh, it's difficult. It's difficult to say.
Picking your favorite child.
Yeah, it is. I think it would be a toss-up between the the mural that I created and the sculpture that I've just created, because the sculpture, it really just signifies, it's very significant in the sense that not only is it an NFT, not only is it physically fractionalized sculpture, it's got augmented reality. You can go and see the sculpture in my land in Decentraland. I've created the coolest augmented reality wearable hoodies that like literally you scan it and your hoodie comes to life. So it's a physical hoodie, and then you also have a digital hoodie, but then it's also a pass to my next project, which is my which is like, it's almost like the entry club to my private members club, which is going to be called the Meta Maison, which is like the house of art or meta for me. Because, if you think about it, like the fashion world has been able to create a house of Dior or house of Gucci. There's fashion houses. But up until NFTs, you couldn't really scale up an artist, right? Could you? Because it's like, how much can one artist do? But with NFTs is you can scale up an artist. So I'm creating my first art house, NFT art house, with me as the creative director. And then being able to then create like something like a fashion house where I create my own collections, but I house other upcoming artists. And then I can work with different brands, very different, celebrities and people who are now coming and saying, we want an NFT collection. What can be our strategy and how I can guide them through that process?
That is so interesting. And do you, so being the artistic director and kind of housing other people, do you collaborate ever with other artists on your NFT projects?
I currently haven't got to it now, but this is definitely something that, this is where the next steps will be, right? Is just being able to, and my art lends itself so much to collaboration. Imagine my SoundBYTEs with X, like another artist, and then, you can kind of create it, together. So yeah, I think it's, and I think that the NFT space is ripe for collaboration, because you can then cross-pollinate different communities and you can get a much wider reach that way.
What about issuing NFTs in places with strict crypto regulations, such as China's NFT market?
So I think where it kind of hopefully is I think it's kind of working with what you've got available to you in terms of the regulations. I think having things like being able to pay with fiat money as well as crypto, I think you have to be able to do both. And I think this is it. It's like my last collection, I wrote the smart contract myself, but you can also get into clever payment methods, right? So people can also pay in fiat as well as in crypto. And I don't think that's just also a regulation thing. I think it's also people, just like people want tangible things, they're still struggling with this concept of buying crypto, but they maybe still want to buy an NFT. And so there's a difference between, I don't know if you've heard the difference between a custodial wallet and a non-custodial wallet, but there's a way in which you can buy an NFT through fiat. And I think being able to have those options, especially if you're trying to bring, I would say, the masses into the NFT space, is what's very important. And that's where I also believe that there's going to be a lot of mass adoption through that channel.
So interesting. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? The way you're building something so new and innovative, and I can only imagine that really it's going to take off from here. So in 10 years, what do you think? Where do you see yourself?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I see myself moving seamlessly between the physical and digital world. I see everybody else doing the same. And I see the fact that we will have multiple avatars and personalities. I think, Mark Zuckerberg's, video that he put out about the meta, they're creating a new metaverse. You will have how you have so many different personalities. You'll be able to express yourself, like, you'll have your corporate just how you have a LinkedIn profile, a Twitter profile, you have a different vibe for each one of those. Now imagine, instead of it just being a profile, it's you as an avatar. So today I want to wake up and be a unicorn who wears who wears a beret on their hat and like is just a belly dancer. Like if I want to be that, I can be that, right? And so, and if I wanted to have like a Lego arm or whatever the case is, I can do whatever I want, right? So this is it. So you'll be able to express yourself very creatively. But I also do think that, and in fact, I think it's already kind of happened, but I've been saying this for a while, is that, it's a bit like, you could kind of live forever also. So your avatar, in fact, they've just done it in Somnian space, is that your avatar, you can like say physically you pass away, right? But you can actually have an avatar which is artificial intelligence, which teaches it, like it acts exactly like you. It's just like a digital twin of you, right? So it thinks like you because you've been training it, right? So it watches you doing what you do, and then it becomes a digital twin of you. And then what happens is that then the physical you passes away, and then like later on the digital person is still available, and your kids grow up and they want advice from mom, and mom gives you advice like mom's around, because AI, and you can
do you think people are emotionally ready for that?
I think not everybody, and I think it definitely has a lot of socio-political things. So I don't want to overbrain you, but like this is
it bubbles up many emotions. Yeah.
Exactly, it does. And I mean, even in a small little way, like with my art, you could actually create a piece because the art talks, right? In my situation, it talks, right, with the SoundBYTEs. So you could actually create a piece of art from me where I hold on to it. And if you ever wanted to release it to your child at 18, if you weren't there, or your grandchildren, or whatever the case is, this NFT can arrive in their wallet. You scan it and you've got the entire augmented reality of your loved one, expressing themselves to you.
That's
incredible. And you can still do that, so like even the pieces that I've created for personalized is that, I had one where a guy lived in Dubai and his mother lived in the US. And like whenever she misses her son, she just does the artwork, and the artwork is him telling her all the stuff why he loves about her, all through the SoundBYTE.
Oh, that's so touching.
Thank you. It's just a different medium and it's how to show that you can use art in just more ways than I think we're using it today.
Profound and quite useful ways, very useful ways that touch more than just your aesthetic, your sensibilities of what you think is attractive or interesting, but that actually have an impact on your life.
And exactly. And talking about that's where utility comes in. Mm-hmm. So this is a big buzzword in the NFT world, is what does that artwork now give you access to? So does it give you access to an emotional message? Does it give you access to a private members club? Does it give you access to a concert or a ticket to go and see your favorite artist? Does it give you access to a VIP event that you can only go to if you have that NFT? And so, for example, even like the people who bought my 145, I call them the Byte Club. Instead of
I like the Byte Club.
The Byte Club. They only if you have my NFT can you go to some of the VIP events that I hold, that you'll have access to maybe some physical artwork that you wouldn't necessarily have if you didn't have my NFT. So these are certain things, is that where now collectors are looking at what other utility does the art have.
Indeed. And at the end of this, and I know you've got art to create, so I won't keep you much longer than maybe about 5 more minutes, if I may, Amrita, but I would love to direct everybody to where they can find out more information about you. But before we do that, I just have a few quick fire questions with just about 5 minutes left, and just answer them as best you possibly can. I'm going to start with this first one. What was your biggest hobby when you were a child?
Actually, it was obviously art. But I love dancing. So I've done ballet, Highland and Scottish dancing. So I was always dancing.
After my own heart, I was a ballet dancer myself. And if you could live absolutely anywhere on this planet, where would it be?
I would have to say Dubai, but Kenya and Switzerland and India, like a bit of all the places where I live today. But I'd love to live once. I'd love to live once in New York and once in LA, I'd say as well.
Yes. Who is your favorite artist? Do you have a favorite artist?
I think Salvador Dali for me is one of the most impactful artists for me.
Okay. Did you ever have a mentor, whether in business or in art?
Mentors are the most important things, but always go to the expert in their field. Don't go to just your best friends or your family, because they're not always the best people. Go to the experts in your field to get the right advice. Yeah,
indeed. And what do you think is the most interesting thing that you've come across in recent days, weeks, whether it's something that you read, something that you've discovered?
So it's a really cute little story. Yesterday it was Easter, and we with our friends, and I find that children between the ages of 6 and 12 understand me the most, because they understand NFTs the most. They're already there. And so I find my children's friends are really, they are the most, I would say, activated when they see me. And this little boy, he's now my collector. He's got one of my 145 bytes. And he says that his quote, and he made the quote, and I put it on my Instagram for him. And we said, art is not just about painting and drawing. Art is also about what you can invent. And it's by Sasha. I always forget his surname, but Sasha, you know who I'm talking about. And this is a shout out to him as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. All right. Try to describe yourself in 3 words if you can.
So, 3 words. That's pretty hard. I would say definitely extrovert. Definitely, I'd say creative, and definitely, I'd like to think I'm generous in heart and spirit as well as everything else. But
those are all lovely qualities and characteristics. I want to thank you so much, Amrita, for joining us. And so finally, for people who are interested in learning more about you, where can they find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at @byamrita, Instagram at art.by.amrita, and LinkedIn at Amrita Sethi. And then from there, you'll find your way.
Wonderful. Amrita Sethi, I want to thank you again so much for joining us. This has been a true pleasure. And that is going to do it for us on this episode of Blockchain All Stars. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.